Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been exploring the steady growth of political authority in ancient Tamilagam from chieftaincy to kingship, that is the Mannan. They ruled from within fortified settlements. They protected their clan from marauders and enemies. And in the early stages, the leader's importance was because of his distributive duties. The leader redistributed the war loot as he deemed fit, and of course, initially this consisted mostly of stolen cattle. Redistributive duties were performed from his irukkai, the throne, while surrounded by his clansmen, his sutram. There is a sutram in the Purathinai Iyal of Tolgapiyam that talks about a ritual ceremony known as the Pillayattu. The sutram goes, வாழ்மலைந்து எழுந்தோனை மகிழ்ந்து பறைதூங்க நாடவர்க்கு அருளிய பிள்ளையாட்டும். The celebration of the investiture of political authority on a youthful, brave warrior who wielded his sword, defeated the enemies, and established the supremacy of his clan. In this cult of Pillayattu, one can see the origins of kingship in the Tamil country. As the settled agrarian life of the Marudam plains progressed, the society approached statehood through a process of social stratification. A stratified society was distinguished by access to fundamental resources. Land was the fundamental resource, and the ruling class had unimpeded access to it, whereas the lesser privileged had impaired access, meaning that they were required to pay their dues in labor, in kind, or as rent. Thus, with the emergence of the two classes, the ruling and the ruled, a state was born. The ruler who controlled more and more lands and territory became a Mannan, and he presided over several chieftains. After the invention of the humble plough, the single major factor that boosted agricultural productivity, directly adding to a ruler's might, was the introduction of the irrigation system. As the Tamil landscape had almost no perennial rivers, the rulers came up with various indigenous water management systems to capture and save precious rainwater. There are innumerable references in the Sangam poems that talk about the different methods of rain harvesting and means of water management. Irrigation not only helped cover larger areas of land, but also helped intensify agriculture as a year-round practice, as we say, the Muppoham Vilaichal, 3 crops an annum. This led to a substantial increase in agricultural produce, which means accrual of more wealth to the people. And hence the poets of Sangam age eulogized the kings who created these irrigation systems and water bodies. In the Puram song 24 sung by Mangudi Marudanar, Omba ஈஹை மாவேள் எவ்வி புனலம் புதவின் மிழலையோடு கழனி கயலார் நாரை போர்வில் சேக்கும் பொன்னணி யானை தொன்முதிர் வேளிர் he sings. He is talking about the generosity of the great chieftain Evvi, who ruled over the Milalai Nadu, and so fertile has the land been made by the water channels that he sees the cranes who have had their stomachfuls of the carp fish that are floating around in the water channels, and women of the ancient Velir clan rode on elephants that were caparisoned with gold ornaments. Such was the kind of wealth. Here, the term Pudavam means sluice gates, hydraulic structures that were conventionally used to control the flow of water in irrigation networks. In a still largely barter economy, the treasury, known as Tiraicheri, consisted of huge storehouses of paddy. Thus, agriculture helped support the non-producing elements in society, right from the king's army to the farmers who sang the king's praise, to craftsmen and artisans, to a proliferation of traders. Everyone was supported by this agricultural wealth. Increased wealth meant increased protection. The king had to maintain a more permanent defense setup, thus laying the foundations of an army. Many Puram poems talk of how kings targeted the enemy's water bodies and destroyed them. In the Purananuru poem 15, sung by the lady poet Nettimayar, in praise of the Pandya king Palyaha Salai Mudugudumi Peruvazhi, the poet sings, தேர் வழங்கினே நின்றெவ்வர் தேயத்து துழங்கியலார் பனையெருத்திற் பாவடியார் செரநோக்கின் ஒளிரு மறுப்பிற் களிறுவர காப்புடைய கயம் படியினை அன்ன சீற்றத்து அணையை goes the poem, in which Kapudaya Kayam refers to a protected water body. That too, Kayam is a specific water body that is filled by the overflow from a nearby river. The poet here is praising the Pandya king who had destroyed the fertile agricultural fields by riding his chariots into them, and who has let loose his army elephants into the drinking water bodies of the enemy, making them muddy and unfit for use. With the need to increase and intensify defense came the need to increase wealth accruing to the king. A strong regulatory authority that would collect a share of the agricultural surplus on behalf of the king, that would in turn help him maintain a larger army. Thus the king and his subjects were dependent on the humble tiller, and this is what led Thiruvalluvar to sing உழுதுண்டு வாழ்வாரே வாழ்வார் மற்றெல்லாம் தொழுதுண்டு பின் செல்பவர். And naturally, the kings who controlled the lands along the riverine plains emerged as the more powerful rulers thanks to the agricultural wealth, and in time became the Vendan, the supreme monarch. The Tolgapiyam in several aphorisms clearly differentiates between a Mannan and a Vendan, and also shows how the Mannan was below the Vendan in terms of political authority. This is also attested to by several Sangam poems, like for example the Purananuru poem 319 sung by Alangudi Vanganar under Vallan Mullai, which sings the praise of a spear-wielding warrior who protects his clan from the enemies. The heroine says, "Sirur Mannan Perunai ஞாயிர் வேந்து விடு தொழிலோடு சென்றனன்." So here the heroine mentions how the Mannan has gone on an assignment given by the Vendan. To understand the evolution of the state, much of the information has to be gleaned from the Sangam literature, as we do not have the equivalent of a political treatise like an Ardhasastra, points out Dr. Kartigesu Sivathambi in his book Studies in Ancient Tamil Society, Economics, Society and State Formation, published in the year 1998. The Ardhasastra is an ancient Sanskrit treatise on statecraft, political science, economic policy and military strategy. Though we normally consider Chanakya, who also went by the name Kautilya, as the author of the treatise, he was a minister of the great Mauryan emperor Chandragupta Maurya. History shows that the Arthasastra was compiled and added to over a period of time between the 2nd century BCE and 3rd century Common Era. The treatise itself was said to have been around till the 12th century Common Era, after which it completely disappeared. It is very interesting to note that in the year 1905, during colonial rule, a Tamil Brahmin in Tanjavur discovered a palm leaf copy of the text in Sanskrit and promptly sent it to the Mysore Oriental Library that had been set up by the British, where it was identified as the Ardhasastra by the librarian Rudrapatna Shama Sastri. In the year 1923, a Malayalam version of the manuscript was found in the Bavarian State Library in Germany, and in the 1950s, a Devanagari script was found in a Jain library in Patan, Gujarat. Fragments of the manuscript were also found in several Buddhist monasteries in today's China, Afghanistan and Pakistan. The eminent linguist Thomas Burrow points out that based on certain terminologies used and regions covered in the work, the authorship could be traced to regions of Gujarat and Maharashtra, where lived a clan by the name Kautilya that exists even today. Dr. Sivathambi points out how in the Ardhasastra, the king is considered as Swamin, the divine monarch, an all-powerful god king who is above the people and is not accountable to them, an ideology adopted by most of the empires of the north, including the Mauryas, an ideology that spread far and wide, going by the multilingual manuscripts that have been found. However, in Tamil country, the king was not treated as a god king. He was the pivot of the society, and as a person of political authority, he was considered indispensable to the functioning of the society. But at the same time, the king had his duty towards his people And this is explained very beautifully in the Purananuru poem 186 sung by Mosikiranar. நெல்லும் உயிரன்றே நீரும் உயிரன்றே மன்னன் உயிர்த்தே மலர்தலை உலகம் அதனால் யான் உயிர் என்பது அறிகை வேன்மிகு தானே வேந்தற்கு கடனே. It is not food that is the life of the soul, nor is it water. The king is the life of the world. And so he who commandeth the army should understand his foremost duty and act accordingly. The same thought is captured by Thiruvalluvar in Kural 740 that goes, ஆங்கு அமைவு எய்தி கண்ணும் பயமின்றே வேந்து அமைவு இல்லாத நாடு. In a country that has all natural resources, if the king is not efficient, then the country will not benefit from it. Dr. Sivathambi points out how the Tirukkural is the earliest work that helps understand the nature of polity in Tamil country. An ethico-moral treatise, Tirukkural belongs to the post-Sangam period and is one of the earliest of the Padinenkizhkanakku works, the 18 didactic books. And as Ilango Adigal quotes from the Tirukkural in his Silappadiharam, Tirukkural can safely be dated to somewhere between the 2nd century to 3rd century common era, he surmises. The Porutpal, the second canto of Tirukkural, has several chapters that explains the duties of a king, his ministry and what comprises a good state. The Kural 381 goes, படைக்குடி கூழ் அமைச்சு நட்பு அரண் ஆறும் உடையான் அரசருள் ஏறு, where Padai is the army, Kudi initially referred to a king's clan but later on meant all the citizens. Kool, though we know is a form of subsistence food like porridge, is used in many Sangam poems to actually mean wealth, as it's shown here in an Ahananuru poem by Kalladanar. Poem 113 goes, இடம் பார்த்து பகைவர் ஓம்பினர் உரையும் கூழ் கெழு குறும்பில் குவையிமில். Here, கூழ் கெழு குறும்பு means a prosperous land. The king, who had the support of all these 6 constituent elements, indeed was a lion among rulers. Vendan was the most powerful militaristic personality to have emerged in Tamil country. He was always associated with an army, but he definitely was not above the system. His power as a ruler was only as good as his guiding and supporting constituents of administration. Tolgapiyam Purathiniyil associates the panegyrics of victory sung by poets to the exploits of a Vendan. It mentions the term Vendan in several aphorisms but doesn't mention Mannan. Suthiram 6 that explains Vanjithinai goes, Vanji Dane Mullayadu Purane, Enja Mannasai Vendanai, Vendan Anjudahat Taleichendru Adal Kuritandre. While describing what is Vanjithinai, Tolgapiyar mentions that it refers to the clashes that happen between 2 Vendars, 2 emperors who are looking to expand their territory. The distinction between the Mannan and the Vendan is also brought out in several Sangam poems, where it is only in relation to a Vendan that a Pasarai, an army camp, is mentioned, points out Dr. Sivathambi, which means that under a Vendan, fighting had been organized on a more professional basis. A Puram poem goes, Venkudai Madiyam Mel Nila Tihaltara Kankuda Irutha Kadal Marul Pasarai. The king's parasol looks as wide as the moon, and his army gathered everywhere resembles an ocean. With the emergence of the Vendar, one could say that Tamil country had entered the intermediary stage of an early state. Even though there seems no specific prescription in writing that mentions that the term Vendan should mean only one of the 3 great monarchs, the Cheras, the Cholas or the Pandyas, tradition seems to have had it that it is only the rulers of these 3 dynasties that were mentioned as Vendars, and of course tradition called them the Moovendars. We will continue to explore the emergence of the 3 great monarchies against this background in the coming episodes. Vanakkam.